They told me it was just a small change, that I didn't need to go on the trip I paid for. But what they didn't know was that I had already seen every transaction, every dollar they took behind my back. My name is Marin Calloway, and if you stay with me, I'll show you how the family who betrayed me for money didn't just lose my support, they lost the truth they were hiding, and everything fell apart after that. Chapter 1. The trip I paid for that I wasn't allowed to take. 3 days before the Bali trip I paid for, my mother walked into my house holding my debit card like it belonged to her. I remember the way the front door didn't even fully close behind her, just a soft click that echoed down the hallway. I was at the kitchen counter, laptop open, trying to finish a report for work before Owen got home from his after-school program. My head was already full, numbers, timelines, emails, all blending together. I almost didn't look up at first. Then I saw her hand, my card, the one I had used the night before to pay the final balance on the resort in Ubud. Gloria didn't smile. She didn't ask how I was. She didn't even pretend this was a normal visit. She just stood there and said, "We need to talk." There was something about the way she said it that made my stomach tighten before I knew why. I closed my laptop slowly and turned toward her. "What's going on?" She held the card up between two fingers, like it was evidence of something I had done wrong. "You're not going on that trip," she said. For a second, I actually thought I misheard her. "What?" "You heard me. You and Owen aren't going to Bali. It doesn't make sense anymore." It doesn't make sense. I repeated the words in my head like they were from a different language. I paid for everything, Mom. Flights, the resort, the transfers, the excursions Owen's been talking about for weeks, the monkey forest, the rice terraces, all of it. Gloria stepped further into the kitchen, completely at ease, like she was rearranging furniture instead of rewriting my plans. "Your sister needs this more than you do, and honestly, you work all the time anyway. It's not like you'd even enjoy it." There it was, that quiet, casual way she had of deciding what I deserved. I felt something shift in my chest. Not anger, not yet, just a kind of disbelief that hadn't caught up to reality. Behind her, I noticed movement in the doorway. My dad stood there, one hand on the frame, looking at the floor like he'd dropped something he couldn't find. "Dad?" He didn't answer. He didn't even look at me. That told me everything I needed to know about where this was going. I took a step closer. "How do you even have my card?" Gloria shrugged like it was nothing. "You left your wallet at my place last weekend. I figured I'd hold on to it." "You figured you'd hold on to it." I reached out for the card, but she didn't hand it over. Instead, she lowered her hand just enough to make it clear this wasn't a misunderstanding. "We've already talked about it," she said. "Vanessa's been under a lot of stress. This trip will be good for her. And honestly, Marin, you make more than all of us combined. It's not a big deal for you." Not a big deal. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. 3 days, I said. "The trip is in 3 days. You're telling me now that I'm not going?" "You're being dramatic," she replied. "It's just a vacation." Just a vacation. Somewhere upstairs, I heard a faint creak, a floorboard I knew too well. Owen. I glanced toward the staircase, and there he was, halfway down, holding onto the railing, his backpack still hanging off one shoulder. He had that look on his face, the one he gets when he's trying to understand something that doesn't make sense. "Mom," he said quietly, "are we not going to Bali?" Everything inside me went still. Gloria didn't even turn toward him. She just kept looking at me, waiting for me to accept it, to nod, to make it easier. I walked past her, up 2 steps, and crouched down so I was at Owen's level. "Hey," I said, keeping my voice steady, "why don't you go put your stuff in your room for a minute, okay?" He didn't move right away. He looked from me to my mother, then back again. "Are we still going to see the monkeys?" The question hit harder than anything Gloria had said. "Yeah," I said, before I could think. "We're still going." I felt Gloria's eyes on me, sharp and immediate. "Marin, don't start making promises you can't keep." I stood up slowly and turned back to her. I can keep my promises, I said. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The air in the kitchen felt thick, like something was about to break. Then Vanessa's name flashed on my phone on the counter. A new story posted. I didn't mean to look, but I did. A bright pink suitcase, brand new, tags still hanging off the handle. Ready for paradise. My chest tightened, not from surprise, but from the way everything suddenly lined up just a little too neatly. I picked up my phone and locked the screen. "Mom," I said, "give me my card." She hesitated, just for a second, then handed it over like she was doing me a favor. "Good," she said. "I'm glad we're being reasonable about this." Reasonable. I slid the card into my pocket and grabbed my keys. "Where are you going?" she asked. "Out. We're not done talking about this." I paused at the door, my hand on the knob. "Yeah," I said quietly. "We are." I didn't slam the door. I didn't raise my voice. I just walked out, down the driveway, and into my car. Owen climbed into the back seat without saying anything. He buckled himself in, holding on to the small paperback book about Bali he'd been carrying around for the past 2 weeks. I started the engine, but I didn't pull out right away. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then, from the back seat, he said, "Are you mad?" I looked at him in the rearview mirror. "No," I said. And it was the truth. Not yet. I wasn't mad. I was thinking. I started the drive again, pulling out of a grocery store parking lot I didn't even need to be at. I turned off the engine, and the sudden silence made everything feel louder. I took out my phone and opened my banking app. I don't know why I did it then. Maybe because of the way my mother held my card. Maybe because of Vanessa's story. Maybe because of that one question Owen asked. The screen loaded. At first, everything looked normal. Rent, utilities, groceries. Then I scrolled. There was a charge from a gas station I didn't recognize. Small, under $50. I frowned and kept going. A pharmacy, not near my house. A boutique, definitely not somewhere I had been. They were spaced out, nothing that would have triggered an alert, nothing large enough to stand out on its own. But together, they felt wrong. I tapped on one of them. The location pulled up. It was near Vanessa's apartment. I felt something cold settle in my chest. I scrolled further back. More charges. Same area, same pattern. For a second, I tried to come up with a reason. Maybe I had stopped there on the way somewhere. Maybe I had forgotten. But I knew my routines. I knew my roots. I knew exactly where I spent money, because every dollar I spent had a purpose. These didn't. In the back seat, Owen shifted, flipping a page in his book. "Did you know monkeys can steal things like sunglasses and food?" I let out a small breath. "Yeah," I said. "I've heard that." He nodded, like that confirmed something important. I stared at my phone again. A part of me wanted to close the app, to tell myself it was nothing, to wait until later when I wasn't so tired, when everything was already complicated. But another part of me, quieter and sharper, wouldn't let it go. I scrolled to the most recent charge. Yesterday. Same area, same pattern. I locked my phone and set it down on the center console. For a long moment, I just sat there, hands resting on the steering wheel, staring straight ahead. Owen hummed softly behind me, completely unaware of the shift happening in the front seat. I realized something then that I hadn't let myself see before. This wasn't about a vacation. It wasn't about a misunderstanding, and it definitely wasn't the first time. I started the car again, pulling out of the... Chapter 2. The Things I Paid For and the Truth I Ignored. The answer should have been simple, but the truth was I'd been avoiding it for years. Not because I didn't notice things, not because I couldn't add numbers or remember conversations. I avoided it because as long as I kept everything undefined, I didn't have to admit what my role in that family had really become. I got Owen inside, helped him get ready for bed, listened to him talk about Bali like nothing had changed. He was still excited, still planning which animals he wanted to see first, monkeys or turtles. He kept going back and forth like the decision mattered. It did matter, just not in the way he thought. After I tucked him in, I stood in the doorway for an extra few seconds, watching him settle under the blanket. His Bali book was still in his hands. He fell asleep holding it. That image stayed with me as I walked back downstairs. I didn't turn on the lights right away. The kitchen sat in that quiet, late-night dimness where everything feels a little more honest. I set my phone on the counter, stared at it, then picked it back up and opened my banking app. This time, I didn't scroll casually. I went line by line. Gas station, $46. Not near my house. Boutique, $112. Not anywhere I shop. Pharmacy, $28. Different city. Another gas station, another small charge, another place that didn't belong to my routine. Individually, they were nothing. Together, they formed something I couldn't ignore anymore. I grabbed a pen and a stack of old papers from the drawer and started writing them down. Date, location, amount. Then I added another column, reason. At first, I tried to explain them. Maybe I forgot. Maybe I stopped somewhere on the way to work. Maybe I used the wrong card. But the more I wrote, the less believable those explanations became. Because I knew my life, I knew my patterns, and these weren't mine. By the time I reached the fourth page, I had counted 17 transactions over the past 4 months. 17, just under $5,000. I stared at the number for a long time, not because it was shocking, because it made sense. Too much sense. Upstairs, I heard the faint sound of Owen shifting in his bed. Then his small voice called out, "Mom?" I walked back to the stairs. "I'm here." He came down halfway, holding on to the railing. Did I do something wrong? The question hit harder than anything my mother had said. "No," I said immediately. "You didn't do anything wrong." "Then why don't they want us there?" I walked up a few steps and crouched so I was eye level with him. Kids always know when something doesn't add up. I pulled him into a hug. "Go back to bed, okay? I'm just figuring something out." He nodded slowly, then turned and went back to his room. I stayed there on the stairs for a second longer than I needed to, because the truth was, I wasn't just figuring something out. I was finally letting myself see it. I went back to the table and kept going, but this time I didn't stop at 4 months. I went back further, 6 months, a year, 2 years. At first, it was harder to track. Older transactions blurred together, smaller amounts scattered across time. But patterns don't disappear, they just get quieter. 200 here, 300 there, 1,000 labeled emergency, another labeled help. I opened old messages, Mom asking for money for a repair, Vanessa needing help with rent, Dad needing something covered that insurance didn't take care of. Each one framed as temporary, each one wrapped in urgency, each one followed by silence once the money was sent. I started entering those into a spreadsheet, not because I needed proof for anyone else, because I needed to see it for myself. By the time the clock hit midnight, the number had passed 52,000. I stopped typing. $52,000. I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes. It wasn't just the amount, it was the consistency, the expectation, the way it had slowly become normal. I remembered the first time my mom asked for money after Dad retired. It was small, a few $100s, something about a bill that came at the wrong time. I didn't think twice. Then it happened again, then again. Then Vanessa started calling. Breakups, job changes, bad timing, always temporary, always just enough to fix the problem. Except the problems never stopped. They just changed shape. And somehow I was always the solution. The next morning, I dropped Owen off at school and sat in the parking lot for a few minutes before driving to work. Kids ran past the car, laughing, backpacks bouncing, completely unaware of how quickly things can shift. I watched them until the last one disappeared inside. Then I picked up my phone and opened my spreadsheet again. At work, I tried to focus. Emails, meetings, deadlines, everything that usually kept me grounded felt distant, like I was watching myself go through the motions while something bigger unfolded underneath. Around noon, my mom called. I let it ring. A text followed. "You're making this into something it's not." I stared at it. Then another message. "We need to talk like adults." Like adults. I almost laughed, because nothing about what they had done felt adult. It felt calculated. I didn't respond. Instead, I opened my spreadsheet and kept going. By the time I finished, the total sat just over $52,000. $52,000. Over 8 years. I stared at it until the numbers blurred. That wasn't help. That wasn't support. That was a system, and I was the center of it. My phone buzzed again. Vanessa. I picked up. What? Wow, she said. Nice attitude. What do you want? Mom says you're overreacting. I leaned back in my chair. Am I? Yes, she snapped. It's just a trip. It's not about the trip. Then what is it about? I looked at the screen in front of me. It's about everything else. She went quiet for a second. You're being paranoid, she said. I tapped my spreadsheet. 17 charges near your apartment, I said, over the last 4 months. Silence. Then defensive. A lot of people live near me. I didn't argue. I didn't need to, because it wasn't about catching her in a sentence. It was about seeing the pattern clearly enough that denial didn't matter anymore. I ended the call without another word. For a long moment, I just sat there staring at the numbers. $52,000. 8 years. Dozens of transactions. Hundreds of moments I had explained away. I closed my laptop slowly, because at that point, it wasn't a question anymore. Not what they had taken, not how long it had been happening. The only question left was what I was going to do about it. And for the first time, I didn't feel confused. I felt cold, clear, and ready to stop being the answer to problems that were never mine to solve. Chapter 3. The pattern I couldn't ignore anymore. Once I saw it that way, I couldn't unsee it. The numbers weren't random anymore. The locations weren't coincidences. Even the timing started to feel deliberate, spaced out just enough to avoid attention, just small enough to stay under the surface of a busy life. I went back through the spreadsheet, this time slower, more methodical. I added a new column and labeled it Pattern. Gas station near Vanessa's apartment, repeated every 2 to 3 weeks. Pharmacy in Matthews, same 3 transactions within a 6-week window. A boutique in Southend, always late afternoon, always on weekdays when I knew I was in meetings. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the screen. Someone wasn't just using my card, they were using it carefully. Upstairs, Owen was already asleep. The house had that quiet, late-night stillness where every small sound feels louder than it should. The refrigerator hummed, the dryer ticked as it cooled down. My phone sat face down on the table like it was waiting for me to do something with it. I picked it up and scrolled back to the most recent charges again. Yesterday, the same gas station, the same area. I zoomed in on the map. Vanessa's street was less than half a mile away. I closed my eyes for a second. This wasn't abstract anymore. This was proximity. This was someone standing in a place I knew, using something that belonged to me. The next morning, I dropped Owen off at school and sat in the parking lot a little longer than usual. Kids ran past the car, laughing, backpacks bouncing, completely unaware of how fragile normal can feel when something underneath it starts to crack. I opened my phone and searched for the number on the back of my debit card. My thumb hovered over the call button. For a second, I hesitated, because once I did this, once I said it out loud, it would stop being something I could quietly fix or explain away. It would become real. I pressed call. A woman answered after a short hold, her voice calm, practiced, the kind of voice that doesn't react no matter what you say. Thank you for calling Bank of America. This is Carla. How can I help you today? Hi, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I think there are some transactions on my account that I didn't authorize. There was a brief pause as she pulled up my information. Okay, Ms. Calloway, I can help you with that. Which transactions are you referring to? I read off the first one, then the second, then the third. As I spoke, I watched the school doors open and close, parents waving, kids disappearing into the building like it was just another ordinary day. Carla didn't interrupt. She just listened, typing occasionally. After I finished, she asked a question that made my chest tighten. Were you in possession of your debit card at the time of these transactions? I swallowed. Not the whole time. Do you know who may have had access to it? I hesitated just long enough for her to notice. It could have been a family member, I said. Okay, she replied, her tone shifting slightly, still calm but more precise now. Based on what I'm seeing, these transactions were not initiated from your usual device or location. We can open a fraud investigation if you'd like. That would involve temporarily freezing your card and reviewing these charges. The word fraud landing heavier than I expected. It sounded official, final, like something that couldn't be undone. If I do that, I said slowly, what happens? We would flag the transactions, issue a new card, and begin an investigation. Depending on the outcome, the charges could be reversed. If a specific individual is identified, there could be further steps, but that depends on how far you choose to take it. How far I choose to take it. I looked out through the windshield, watching a mother kneel down to fix her daughter's shoelace before sending her off toward the building. I'm not ready to file anything yet, I said, but I want this documented. Of course, I'll note your account. And Ms. Colloway, if you notice any additional unauthorized activity, I recommend contacting us immediately. Thank you. When I hung up, my hands were cold. I wasn't shaking anymore. That part had passed. This felt different, clearer. I drove to work, parked, and sat in my car for a minute before going inside. The world didn't look different, but I felt like I was seeing it through a sharper lens. At my desk, I opened my email and forced myself to answer what needed to be answered. Logistics delays didn't stop just because your family was quietly taking from you. Shipments still needed rerouting, clients still needed updates, problems still expected solutions. That was what I did. I solved things. Around noon, my phone buzzed. It was my mother. I let it ring. A few seconds later, another call came in, this time from Vanessa. I picked up. What do you want? Wow, she said, her voice already edged with irritation. Nice tone. Mom said you called the bank. So she knew. I asked questions, I said. That's all. You're going to get her in trouble over nothing. Nothing? I repeated. There was a pause. You're seriously doing this right now over a few charges? A few charges. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. How did you even know about the bank call? Mom told me, she snapped. She's freaking out because you're acting like this is some kind of crime. Another pause. And it's not, she added quickly. Not. The word hung there. You used my card. I didn't use my card, she replied immediately, too quickly. Then how do you explain the charges near your apartment? Silence. I didn't fill it. I just waited. You're being paranoid, she said finally. A lot of people live around here. It doesn't mean anything. I let out a slow breath. Did you call the resort? What? The resort in Bali. Did you call them? What are you even talking about? I didn't answer right away. Instead, I opened my email and pulled up the confirmation from Padma Ubud. There was a note attached to it now, something I had missed the first time. A record of a call, a request to modify the guest list, denied due to lack of authorization. I hadn't noticed the timestamp before. It was 2 days ago, the same day Vanessa posted about getting her nails done, the same afternoon my mother showed up with my card. You don't have to answer, I said quietly. I already know someone tried to change the booking. You're reaching, Vanessa said, but there was something different in her voice now, less confident, less sharp. Am I? Yes, she said, louder now. And even if I did call, which I didn't, it's not like anything happened. They didn't change anything. That was the moment. Not what she said, how she said it. The shift from denial to defense without even realizing it. I sat up straighter now. So you did call? I said if I did, she snapped. God, you always twist things. I closed my eyes for a second. You don't get to twist this anymore. There was a long silence on the other end. Then she laughed, short and sharp.
You really think you're some kind of victim here after everything Mom has done for you? There it was, the line, the script, the thing that always got me to step back, to question myself, to soften. But this time, it didn't land the same way. What exactly has she done for me? I asked. Another silence. Exactly. I ended the call before she could respond. For a while, I just sat there, my phone still in my hand, the office noise humming faintly outside my door. I wasn't guessing anymore. I wasn't piecing together fragments and hoping they made sense. I had a pattern. I had transactions. I had a timeline. And now I had confirmation. Maybe not in the form of a signed confession, but in the way Vanessa's voice shifted, in the way she moved from denial to defense without even realizing it. That was enough. I opened my spreadsheet again and added a new column. Likely user. Gas station, Vanessa. Pharmacy, unknown. Boutique, Vanessa. I didn't need perfect accuracy. I just needed consistency. By the time I finished, the pattern was impossible to ignore, not just to me, to anyone. I printed the document and watched as the pages slid out of the printer, one by one, each line a record of something I had allowed for too long. Then I opened my email and printed the resort confirmation, including the call log. I placed everything into a plain manila folder. No labels, no notes, just facts. I held it in my hands for a moment, feeling the weight of it. It wasn't heavy, but it carried 8 years of my life. I set it down on my desk and looked at it like it belonged to someone else. This wasn't about confronting them in anger. It wasn't about yelling or demanding apologies. It was about something much simpler, showing them exactly what they had done. And for the first time since all of this started, I wasn't wondering what the truth was anymore. I was deciding what to do with it.
By the time Saturday came, I already knew exactly where I was going to use it. My mother's backyard looked the same as it always did. Folding chairs lined up in uneven rows, a long plastic table covered with aluminum trays, the smell of grilled chicken and sweet barbecue sauce hanging in the air. Kids ran across the grass. Adults stood in small circles, pretending everything was easy, predictable, normal. It almost made me laugh. I parked at the end of the driveway and sat there for a second longer than necessary. The manila folder rested on the passenger seat. Quiet, unremarkable. It didn't look like something that could change anything. Owen leaned forward from the back seat. "Are we staying long?" I looked at him in the mirror. "Not too long." He nodded, satisfied with that, and went back to fiddling with a loose thread on his shirt. I picked up the folder and stepped out of the car. The moment I walked into the yard, my mother saw me. Her smile came too quickly, too wide, the kind she used when she was trying to control the way a situation looked from the outside. "There you are," she said, walking toward me like nothing had happened. "I was wondering if you were going to show up." "I said I would." She glanced at Owen. "Hi, sweetheart," she said, softer now. "Go say hi to your cousins." Owen looked at me first. I nodded, and he ran off toward the other kids. For a second, it was just me and her. "You look tired," she said. "I've been working." She gave a small, dismissive hum. "Well, try not to bring that energy here. Today is supposed to be relaxing." Relaxing. I tightened my grip on the folder. Vanessa appeared a moment later, sunglasses perched on her head, a drink in her hand, her nails exactly the same shade I had seen in that story post. She stopped when she saw me. "Hey," she said, like we hadn't had the conversation we had 2 days ago. "Hey." Her eyes flicked briefly to the folder, then back to my face. "What's that?" "Something we need to talk about." She let out a short laugh. "Seriously, Marin, can we not do this here?" Todd stood near the grill, talking to one of our cousins, but I could feel his attention shift. He glanced over, just once, then looked back like he didn't want to get involved. Dennis was at the far end of the table, pouring himself a drink, his back half turned toward us. I took a step closer to the table and set the folder down. "We're doing it here," I said. The shift was immediate. Not loud, not dramatic, just a subtle tightening of the space around us. Conversations didn't stop, but they softened. People noticed. My mother's smile faded just enough to show something underneath. "Marin, this isn't the time." It's exactly the time. I opened the folder. Paper against plastic tablecloth made a quiet, sharp sound that somehow carried. "I'm not here to argue," I said. "I'm here to show you something." Vanessa rolled her eyes. "Oh my God." I ignored her. I pulled out the first set of pages and slid them across the table. "These are my bank statements for the last 4 months." No one reached for them at first. I pointed to the highlighted lines. 17 transactions I didn't make. Gloria crossed her arms. "You're overreacting again." I didn't respond. I turned the page. Gas stations near Vanessa's apartment, a boutique in South End, a pharmacy in Matthews. All places I wasn't at. Vanessa stepped closer now, her voice sharper. "You can't prove that." "I don't need to prove where I was," I said. "I need you to explain why my card was used there." Silence. It stretched, just long enough to make people uncomfortable. Todd set down the tongs he was holding. "What is she talking about?" My mother jumped in before anyone else could speak. "She's confused," she said quickly. "She's been under a lot of stress, and she's taking it out on family." I reached into the folder again and pulled out the next set. "This is a spreadsheet of everything I've paid for since 2016. That got their attention. I slid it forward. $52,000. Someone behind us let out a quiet breath. Gloria laughed, but it sounded forced. "You're seriously keeping score now?" "I'm keeping track," I said. "There's a difference." I let that sit for a second, then added quietly, "I didn't mind helping. I minded not knowing when it stopped being help." My mother's voice hardened. "After everything we've done for you, this is how you talk to me?" There it was, the line she always used. It didn't hit the same anymore. "What exactly have you done for me?" I asked. Her mouth opened, then closed. Dennis shifted his weight, finally turning toward us. "Let's all just calm down," he said. "This doesn't need to get out of hand." "It's already out of hand," I replied, not looking at him. I pulled out the last page. "This is from the resort in Bali." Vanessa froze. My mother didn't move, but I saw it in her eyes, the flicker of recognition. "There was a call made 2 days ago. Someone tried to remove me and Owen from the booking." A murmur rippled through the people nearby. "I didn't make that call." I looked directly at Vanessa. "Neither did I." She scoffed, but there was no confidence behind it. "So what, you think I did it?" "I think you knew about it." Her face changed just slightly, but enough. "I didn't do anything," she said, louder now, "and even if I called, which I didn't, it didn't work, so why are you acting like this is some big conspiracy?" That was it. That was the moment everything tipped. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't step closer. I just said it. "You just admitted you called." The words landed flat and heavy. She blinked, then stopped. Around us, the air had shifted completely. Conversations had gone quiet. People were watching now, not pretending not to. Todd stepped forward, his expression tight. "Vanessa," he said, "did you use her card?" She shook her head too quickly. "No." "Then why are there charges by your place?" "Because I live in a city," she snapped. "Other people exist there." Todd looked at me, then at the papers on the table. 52,000, he repeated quietly. No one corrected him. My mother tried again, her tone changing now, softer, almost pleading. "Marin, we can talk about this at home. You don't need to make a scene." I met her eyes. "I'm not making a scene. I'm ending one." For a moment, no one spoke. Then I added, steady, clear, "I've already contacted the bank. The transactions are under review." That landed differently. Fear moved through her face, quick and sharp. "You wouldn't do that," she said. "I already did." Dennis stepped forward then, finally, his voice low. "Is that true?" "Yes." He looked at my mother, then at Vanessa, something shifting in his expression, like he was seeing something he had chosen not to see before. "This has gone too far," he muttered. Todd exhaled slowly. "We've been leaning on her too much, way too much." Vanessa turned on him. "Are you serious right now?" He didn't answer her. He just looked at the papers again. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was heavy, It was everything that had been avoided for years, finally sitting in the open with nowhere to hide. I closed the folder and picked it up. I'm not arguing about this. I'm done paying for things I didn't agree to. My mother's voice cracked, just slightly. So that's it? You're just going to turn your back on your family? I shook my head. No, I said. I'm just not going to fund it anymore. For the first time, she didn't have a response. I looked around once, at the yard, the table, the people who suddenly felt like strangers. Then I walked back toward the driveway. No one stopped me. No one followed. Behind me, I could hear voices rising, not loud enough to make out words, but enough to know that something had already started to break. I opened the car door, set the folder back on the seat, and sat there for a moment, hands on the steering wheel, the noise of the house fading behind me. For years, I had been the one holding everything together. Now, for the first time, I was walking away and letting it fall where it would. Chapter 5. The moment I stopped being their solution. The drive home felt longer than it should have, like distance had stretched just enough to let everything settle into place. Owen talked the whole way, something about a game he played with his cousins. The rules didn't make much sense, but he laughed when he explained it, and I nodded when I needed to, answered when he paused, kept my voice steady like nothing had shifted. He didn't need to carry that weight. He had already seen too much. When we got home, I moved through the kitchen like it was any other night. Bread in the pan, butter melting, the smell filling the room. Owen sat at the table with his Bali book open, flipping through the same pages he had memorized weeks ago. Then he looked up. Are we still going? I didn't hesitate. Yes. He studied my face for a second, like he was checking for cracks. Really? Really? That was enough for him. He nodded and went back to his book, completely at peace in a way I hadn't felt in years. My phone buzzed on the counter. Mom. I turned it over. Then another message. You didn't have to do that in front of everyone. Another. You embarrassed me. I let them sit there. For years, silence meant I was agreeing, that I would smooth things over, take the call, fix the tone, make it easier for them to pretend nothing was wrong. Tonight, silence meant something different. It meant I was done explaining. After Owen went to bed, I sat at the kitchen table with the folder open in front of me. I didn't need to read it again, but I did anyway. Every charge, every line, every quiet moment I had chosen not to look too closely at. At 8:39, my phone rang again. I answered this time. Her voice came through tight. You called the bank. I leaned back in the chair. I asked questions. They said they might reverse the charges. They will. A sharp inhale. You don't do this to family. I looked at the dark mirror across from me, my reflection barely visible. You don't take from me for months and call it family. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? Silence. Then the shift. You make more than all of us. There it was. Not denial, not regret, just expectation. I let out a slow breath. That doesn't make it yours. You're overreacting. No, I said quietly. I just stopped ignoring it. Her voice hardened. You're tearing this family apart. I shook my head even though she couldn't see it. No, I'm just not holding it together by myself anymore. She hung up. I didn't call back. The next morning, the bank confirmed what I already knew. New card issued, charges under review. Some would be reversed. It wasn't about the money. It never really was. It was about control. And for the first time, I had it back. By midday, Vanessa texted, You're doing too much. Then, Mom is really upset. Then, we can fix this if you just calm down. I read them all. I didn't respond. That was the part they weren't prepared for. Not anger, not shouting, not a fight they could twist into something else. Just absence. That afternoon, Todd called. I answered. He sounded tired. I should have said something a long time ago. I didn't speak. We all got used to it, he continued. You fixing things, paying for things. It stopped feeling like help. I leaned back in my chair. I know. A pause. You weren't wrong. It was simple. It meant more than it should have, not because I needed him to say it, but because someone finally did.
I don't know what happens now, he added. I do. What? I stop paying. Silence. Then a quiet exhale. Yeah, he said. That sounds right. That night, the house felt different. Not empty, lighter. I packed slowly. Clothes, sunscreen, passports, Owen's book. Every item felt like a small decision I was finally making for myself. At 10:12, another message came through. If you add us back to the trip, we can move past this. I stared at it for a long time. Then I set the phone down. Because that was the truth of it. They didn't want resolution. They wanted access, and I was done giving it. The next morning, Owen came downstairs fully dressed, suitcase in hand, passport clutched like it was the most important thing in the world. I'm ready. I smiled. I can see that. The drive to the airport was quiet. He fell asleep halfway there, head against the window, Bali book still in his lap. At the airport, everything moved like it always did. Lines, announcements, people rushing past like every story was happening all at once. But for me, everything felt clear. Check-in, security, gate. 2 boarding passes, both with my name. At the gate, Owen pressed his face to the glass, watching the plane. Do you think that's ours? Probably. He turned back to me. We're really going. Yeah, we are. When they called our group, he grabbed my hand without thinking. I held on to it. We walked down the jet bridge together, and with each step, something inside me settled. Not anger, not revenge, relief. My phone buzzed one last time before I turned it off. Vanessa, you've changed. I looked at it. Then I turned on airplane mode. Maybe I had, or maybe I'd just stopped being something they could use. As the plane started to move, Owen squeezed my hand. I looked out the window, the runway stretching ahead, the city slowly pulling away. For years, I thought being needed meant being loved. I was wrong. Being needed without respect is just another way of being used. And walking away isn't losing. Sometimes it's the first time you finally choose yourself. If you've ever been the one everyone depends on until the moment you say no, tell me what you would have done in my place and stay here for more stories like this.